The Saudi Arabian Grand Prix played host to many controversial moments. But perhaps the biggest talking point after the race was the FIA's perplexing decisions regarding Fernando Alonso's penalty. In fact, it became such a jumbled mess at one point that it reminded fans of the 2021 season finale in Abu Dhabi and served to further teams' distrust in the sport's governing body. However, it appears that the Ferrari team did even worse, with a disastrous performance highlighting just how much they've regressed over the winter compared to Red Bull. So join us as we look at the FIA's contentious penalty saga, and make sure to watch until the end to find out what the Ferrari boss has said about their catastrophic showing in Jeddah. Aston Martin's Fernando Alonso finished third at the Jeddah circuit on Sunday, trailing Red Bull duo Sergio Perez and Max Verstappen. However, shortly after the race, the FIA announced that Alonso had been given a 10-second penalty for having not properly served a 5-second penalty for failing to line up within the grid box earlier in the race. This dropped Alonso to 4th place behind Mercedes driver George Russell. The penalty was imposed after video footage of the incident showed the rear jack briefly touching the back of the car while Alonso waited for mechanics to begin a tyre change. However, following the decision, Aston Martin representatives went to the stewards to request a review of the situation because they felt the rules regarding the serving of penalties were unclear. While the jack may have hit the car, the regulations do not explicitly state that mechanics are not permitted to touch it. Instead, F1's sporting regulations state in Article 54.4 that while a car is stationary in the pit lane as a result of incurring a penalty, it may not be worked on until the car has been stationary for the duration of the penalty. Aston Martin team principal Mike Crack said the manufacturer followed the rules and did not work on the car until 5 seconds had passed. He confirmed that sporting director Andy Stevenson had been in discussions with race stewards about the matter, implying that there was some ambiguity in the specific wording of the regulations. "There have been discussions," he said. "There were different things in the sporting regs because it says not working on the car. I think the time was clear. Actually, it was more than 5 seconds because we took some margin. The rules say you cannot work on the car, and to our understanding, we have not worked on the car. But I think now this discussion is about the jack touching the car or not, and this is what I think is the moment being clarified." The FIA, on the other hand, were emphatic that if mechanics touched the car, it would be a violation of the rules, which they reiterated in a statement. However, a few hours after the race, the FIA announced that it had changed its mind because Aston Martin demonstrated that no such agreement existed among teams. The following was their decision. Having reviewed the new evidence, we concluded that there was no clear agreement, as was suggested to the stewards previously, that could be relied on to determine that parties had agreed that a jack touching the car would amount to working on the car without more. In the circumstances, we considered that our original decision to impose a penalty on car 14 needed to be reversed, and we did so accordingly. In the midst of the uncertainty, the FIA has promised to investigate the matter in order to clarify exactly what is and is not permitted, with a clear definition to be provided to teams ahead of the Australian Grand Prix. The review of the rules regarding mechanics touching the car is likely to be one of several issues raised during the meeting in relation to the Alonso situation. And with Fernando Alonso and Esteban Ocon penalized for starting out of position this year, there are also concerns about how difficult it is for drivers to see the grid boxes. Furthermore, questions have been raised as to why a formal investigation into Alonso serving his penalty was only launched on the final lap of the race, despite the fact that he'd been given the all-clear when it occurred. The activation of the first safety car was another source of contention during the race. Lance Stroll was on track for a strong haul of points in Jeddah when his Aston Martin AMR 23 decided enough was enough, with the team ordering the Canadian to stop the car as soon as possible. With Stroll obliging, he would park the Aston Martin in the runoff area. But the FIA decided to use the safety car to neutralize the race, resulting in a flood of pit stops as drivers looked to take advantage of the reduced time loss, including Stroll's teammate Alonso. The safety car, however, did not appear to be required, as Stroll had positioned the poorly AMR 23 well off the racing line next to an escape road, making for a relatively simple recovery mission. The FIA, though, has moved to clarify the situation, explaining that the position where Stroll had stopped was not clear from the camera angles available at the time, and thus deploying the safety car was deemed the safest option. While the FIA dropped the ball during the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, it pales in comparison to Ferrari's disastrous performance. The Italian team hoped that the layout and different demands of the Jeddah circuit would allow it to pose a greater threat to Red Bull than it did in the season opener in Bahrain. But despite Charles Leclerc's qualifying time, which was good enough for the front row, the Scuderia's race pace was lacking. After looking strong on fresh rubber, both Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc faded on the hard compound after the pit stops, finishing 6th and 7th, even behind Mercedes. The outcome was far from ideal, coming 12 months after Ferrari had fought Verstappen all the way for title victory. Team principal Fred Vasseur stated that it was now critical for Ferrari to understand why its car had not performed well thus far, and not to pretend things were better than they are. When asked what the first question he will ask the engineers, Vasseur replied, "To not bullshit ourselves." The most important thing in this kind of situation is to know where we are going well and what we are doing wrong, but we cannot bullshit ourselves. We have to change. We have to understand where we are wrong and where we have to push. It's not good enough to speak. We will not be faster like this. For me, the picture is quite clear. The potential of the car is good, but it's not enough compared to Red Bull because we are not able to extract the maximum from the car every time. Vasseur believed Ferrari's failure in Saudi Arabia was due to poor management of the various tyre compounds, particularly a lack of pace on the hard. Though he remains convinced that the SF23 has the baseline that Ferrari requires to challenge at the front this year, he believes the team lacks the ability to run at peak performance for the duration of a Grand Prix weekend. He believes that its qualifying pace, which was proven to be competitive with Red Bull, provides a glimpse of the car's potential. However, Vasseur says that being able to unleash that kind of potential over the entire Grand Prix weekend is critical to Ferrari delivering this season. I don't want to push on the positive side because the outcome of the weekend is not good, and we have to be focused on what is going wrong, not the positives, he explains. But I have to keep in mind to do a proper analysis of what is going well, and I think that qualifying went pretty well. For sure, we always want to do a better job, and it was difficult to know exactly what was the potential of the Red Bull because Max didn't do the Q3. But at least I had the feeling that compared to Mercedes and Aston Martin, we did a step forward. We were 1/10 off in qualifying. They were 3 or 4 tenths, I think. And I think we are on the right way in terms of development. But potential is one thing, and I think on the potential side we did a decent step. The issue is we have to stay at this maximum potential all over the weekend, and it's not what we are doing on Sunday. I think on some occasions we are there, but on some occasions or some stints over the weekend we were not able to be at the maximum of our possibility. But what are your thoughts? Can Ferrari recover and challenge Red Bull for the title? What about the FIA's mess? Will another Massey-esque restructure be needed to fix its problems? Please let us know in the comments section below. If you enjoyed the video, please consider liking it and subscribing. Be sure to click the bell icon to be notified of future uploads. Thanks for watching.